In my last video, where I introduced the current Pluto-Mars square, I spoke about Mars as corresponding to the initiating impulse within consciousness. With our Mars, we have to have a connection to our own personal sense of direction in life. And if we don't have that connection, then we're not the leader of our own soul journey. So from the point of view of the soul's journey, incarnating in human form, playing out this particular episode, we can think of Mars as the way consciousness is consciously, on a moment-to-moment basis, navigating the wide open playing field of life and making choices. The nature of these choices correspond to how each individual soul is responding to the constant stimulus, all that's happening around, and our internal reactions, our impulses, our instincts. And what it points to on a deeper level is that there's a reason for being here, right? That this life isn't just about playing out some personality with a bunch of preferences and instinctive impulses and drives and desires. There's an underlying unfolding and unraveling and discovery happening here. As beings of consciousness, we're here in this form playing out these experiences, and everything is reflecting us back to ourselves. And I suggest you look at some other videos I put out exploring the nature of the natal chart. Astrology is non-causative, and 3 levels of looking at the natal chart. And so when we come to Mars, we ask the question, where are you going? Right? Like, what's the point? What's the purpose of having a personal will, of being able to say no to some things and yes to other things? Why do we have that function, that capacity, that capability to navigate our life experiences with a very, very subjective and personal sense of direction? It's because it is built into our human experience to fend for a deeper, predominantly unconscious drive that is leading us into this life in the first place. We are going somewhere. There is something unraveling. Each soul has a journey to walk, and each soul has to walk it and walk it all the way. And this comes back to a topic that I've often spoken of, which is you can't choose your battles. You choose how to be in relationship to what is arising, and really what is arising is reflecting what is already inside of you. Because all of this life, the hidden but not so hidden, secret but not really secret, trick, truth, mystery, revelation, is everything's here. This doesn't mean we just sit in a cave and avoid all interaction. That would be its own positionality, its own belief structure, its own way of thinking, this is how I'm supposed to do things. There's no one right way to engage as a human in this world of duality and multiple experiences. Really, when it comes down to it, the path that we walk is simply what is relevant for each one of us. We have to walk it. If it's to sit in a cave, if it's to do a family thing, if it's to explore relationships, if it's to create a business, if it's to become professional in some field and become an advocate, whatever. And it's not an end goal. Nothing's an end goal. Mars is constantly moving, constantly moving. In fact, if you think of the glyph for Mars, we have a circle and an arrow coming out of the circle. And the circle, we can say, represents spirit, wholeness, oneness. And as I mentioned in the last video, Mars is kind of always moving from that towards the next, So it's an inherently out of balance energy in the sense that it's creating perpetual movement. And so we have experiences, we're like, I need to do this, I need to try this. I'm hanging out with a little boy, and he's a great example of that Mars energy because everything's very immediate. Like, I need to try this. I need to do this. And then it's something else. So all of our experiences give us a taste of what it's like to play it out, to do it, to experience it, to learn from it, get the consequences, learn the lessons. This is how it affects other people. This is what it does to me. We mature, but then we come back to the playing field. What's next? What am I called to? So we have to understand that when we look at Mars. And when we look at Mars in the natal chart, what we're connecting with, what we need to sort of investigate and question is what way of acting, what path of action, what relationship to assertion, to self-leadership is required and necessary, and what's unraveling. What are some lessons around that? What are some challenges around that? As it all relates to, why is the soul here? Mars takes us through the experiences that we need in life to uncover more of ourself. And so working with our Mars energy is like clearing the path, right? So a person might have to do some work with learning how to assert themselves. Another person might have to do some work with learning how to listen and becoming aware of the effect that their actions creates. Everyone's Mars is different. And this takes us to Pluto. Pluto is the underlying force of evolution. When we look at Pluto, we're looking at a very impersonal and driving force of creation to evolve. Pluto says everything comes and goes. Your body comes and goes. Your relationships come and go. The thing that makes you feel great, it'll come, it'll go. The thing that makes you feel bad, it'll come and it'll go. And we learn through the Pluto journey how common, how easy it is for identity to get hooked and wrapped up in these ephemeral, temporal human experiences. Like, I lost this. And we stay there on that plane for a long time. We create a whole world, a whole paradigm, a whole identity, and thus a whole karmic reality played out within time and space at that level that we're kind of stuck. Then we might unravel it at a certain point, like, oh, I can let it go. I don't need it because it's not here. And that's a journey, and I don't want to downplay it because we all go through those experiences of becoming deeply enmeshed in our attachments and our obsessions and our compulsions and psychologically what we can't quite see clearly. So Pluto's evolution is where consciousness clarifies and clarifies and clarifies and refines, so that attention is centered in the eternal soul, in the timelessness of oneself. And the more centered we are in our timelessness, in our eternal being, in what doesn't come and go, our power, our true power, it speeds and expedites our experiences here. We can move through experiences, learn from it, grow from it, move on more quickly. Things don't need to last as long. And if you go back to my talk on levels of consciousness, I speak a little bit about this idea that as a soul evolves, there's less of a need to play out really dense experiences of time and space. Because when we're really, really attached to, I need the world to see me a certain way, then we're going to get married, get a job, shape our body, do everything in life according to that desire to fit in. But when that desire isn't there, there's more lightness, right? Or if we have this desire, I need to be liked by this person. I need this person's approval, maybe connected to I need my parents' approval, right? That right there, that fixation determines an entire worldview. Everything we do is subconsciously guided by this need to gain this approval on the outside. But if we release that, there's so much more lightness, and we can move through our experiences with greater clarity. As we evolve, we can see things more clearly for what they are because we're not looking to get something out of it. Now, the connection between Mars and Pluto is very important. So the connection between these two planets in your own chart is important. And the connection between these two in general, in the transits in the sky, are very important. Mars is what we're doing consciously what we're aware of. I want this water. Drink this water. I'm going to make a video. I'm attracted to this person. I need to end this relationship. There's something that I'm feeling. I'm going to make a choice, right? Constantly navigating life in that way. But Mars is basically paving the pathway to kind of access the deeper subconscious content of Pluto. The deeper thread, the bottom line content that's unraveling within our consciousness. So we make choices, we open up doors, and what's behind those doors is a whole bunch of shadow material, things that we haven't seen before. I'm drawn to this person, get into this relationship. And now all this stuff arises. And Mars is like, oh shit, what did I just do? That's what happens. If you look at the chart, Mars, which rules Aries, is in conjunct to Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. And that in conjunct relationship, which is 150 or 210 degrees, is sort of this tense, confusing, clumsy at times sort of dynamic. Whereas Mars, there's that need for freedom to make choices and navigate. But then we basically get into situations in life where we're going to face content, psychological content, that basically keeps us in place. In Scorpio, we're going to have to stay there and look at it, explore it, and we can't free ourselves from it. And we'll recreate the same dynamics until we can really free ourselves from it. And we can say a whole lot more about the relationship between Aries and Scorpio, Mars and Pluto. It's a very fascinating area to reflect upon. Or if you have planets in the first house and the 8th house, the relationship between those two are very profound, very interesting. But it also represents that psychology of entrapment. In the Mars archetype is this deep need for freedom of movement. And in the Pluto Scorpio archetype is simultaneously this desire to merge, right? To connect very deeply with others, to have deep experiences, and to share sexual intimacy, to merge energetic fields in that way, and thus to form attachments. And then all the needs, all the fears and all the insecurities and possible entanglements and power dynamics emerge there. And if you just run away from it, you have all this unresolved content, and you'll recycle and you'll come back to it at some point. But if you just kind of get lost in it, you might get stuck in this power game of the manipulator or the manipulated, or a codependency of some kind. And so the relationship between Mars and Pluto, in the essence of things, at the core, is this leader energetic of this energetic quality of self-leadership to claim one's sovereignty, rooted in one's ability to make conscious choices through deep, penetrating self-knowledge. It's like facing the darkest places, facing what is scary and uncomfortable. And instead of running or getting afraid, looking at it, which means really embracing the emotions, embracing the content, and holding the stance of courage. And that's where Mars and Pluto sort of correspond to this analogy of the self-cleaning oven. The heat gets turned up. It's uncomfortable. But Pluto teaches us that everything wants to move. Everything that comes will also go. So anything that we give attention to from the stance of consciousness, from the stance of self-responsibility, not victimhood, it moves, it begins to shift the moment we begin to show up in alignment with it. The moment we begin to hold a stance of conscious sovereign choice. And again, our sovereign choice does not mean we'll be able to do anything we want to do, because that is not real. Life will hit us really hard if we try to assert our personal will. Our deepest psychological limitations come up here. We can't force things that we haven't met, that we haven't touched the root of. When we get to the root of something, then we can dance and move it and change it, right? Because we've met it, we found it inside of ourselves, so it's no longer separated. But as long as anything has not been met, that we have not connected at the core of our own being with the root of a dynamic, we cannot change that dynamic. And the dynamic will show up as much as it needs to reflect and support us to become a leader in our own lives. All right, so I know I said I would talk about sexuality and the masculine impulse within creation, but I think this was a really good video just on its own. So I'll talk about that in the next part 3, Mars squaring Pluto.